Yeah, very interesting and comprehensive presentation. I enjoyed it. Kind of a specific question about the sediment velocity model, and I want to make sure I understand. So you go down, you're kind of limited by the boreholes, right? So
Yeah.
you go down, did you say to 1 kilometer per second?
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, then what do you do if the model that you're patching that onto is still less than that? Do you just fill in with constant velocity, or how exactly do you handle that? That's my question.
Oh, okay. So I go, if the model we're patching it on, so I can extrapolate all the way down to 1 kilometer per second.
Right.
So I can go find it. If it's stiffer, I stop sooner. If it's softer, I just go looking for it.
Okay. So there's, I guess what I'm,
I don't have a constant depth.
all right.
I go wherever I go.
And so there's no discontinuities that are introduced, artificial discontinuities?
No, that's right. No, that's right. So I rely on, if now the VS30, let's say, how can I say that? Let's say VS30 is 200, and Eli, for example, 2010, would take this 200 and stretch it down to 350. But let's say that CVMS without Eli, that's the Southern California community velocity model, without Eli would have the Z 1.0 at 100 meters. I stop at 100 meters because that's where the basement rock is. And so the shape of the basin is not affected by where I go, it's affected by where the reflection results are. I'm just filling the information that's missing without touching the basement shape. What I don't know exactly is what to do at that edge of the basin, and that's just something we're being artistic right now, and sort of hoping they were like we're fitting a polynomial, right? What we think the shape of the basin edge is, which is better than bathtub type stuff. But as I said, we need simulations to run, probably simple ones in the beginning, kind of constrained. In the past, we tried to do something like this to test the basin edges with Gardner Valley. But Gardner Valley, we talk about valley, is a valley in the middle of the mountains. So it never worked as a nice validation for a valley site. Because it was always, all those long periods that are valley scale are also topography scale. So they're contaminated. At least that's what I see, because I never managed to decipher what's what. Because my PhD was in topography, so I see all sorts of different waveforms. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Long answer.
Any other question? So one question. Either if you use Asimaki's approach or even if you use your approach, the nonlinearity of that layer that you're including is coming short of the real nonlinearity that you have next to a pile or a footing. So what do you suggest to do in those cases? Because you say, well, now I have included the nonlinearity in the soil, but in reality, the structural engineer is going to say, but no, this doesn't help me. What will you do?
That's a question.
Yeah.
Why are you asking questions? You have the answers. So I guess it's this DRM approach where I had a slide on there. I don't know how to get to it now, but you can propagate, you can do your simulations, regional simulations, with no structures on top, with Hercules SW4, and ignore all of that very shallow nonlinearity until the very end. And then you can go to your region of interest and create another local model that is not two-way coupled with the Hercules model, but rather one-way coupled with it, and inject those free field motions in a consistent way using essentially a method of superposition by Bielak, the domain reduction method. and then do your local calculations for your supported or embedded structure. And there are errors in there a little bit, but probably not too bad.
I just want to say that if the region is a generalized sedimentary region, I think that using nonlinearity in the far field is not contradictory with what E.T. just saying. For example, I would still use some form of nonlinearity to generate the free field motions, and then use the DRM to transfer them to the even more so, right? Because the far field boundary conditions are still going to be affected by the generalized nonlinearity of the sediments, even if the localized response is going to be worse, right? Because of the presence of the soil structure interaction or what have you, right?
Dominic, I completely agree. So what you are bringing is the nonlinearity to what we can call the semi-far field information that you can input in your then more localized. And that localized, as it is showing here, is the information that is happening in this block that is going to affect the soil. That here there is a lot of nonlinearity where you are going to have your structure. Yeah. And then, so hopefully, this is something that gives a better response to the structure. Because the structural engineer is going to be very concerned about the nonlinearity here and how that affects to the drift in the columns and so forth.
You might not need the accuracy of the plasticity model, but you might need the accuracy of some rough understanding of how weaker the soil is compared to the competent. You know what I'm saying?
And let me just add, the logistical issue there is that you may run a huge simulation with Hercules or SW4, but you need to create the workflow for people to use that simulated ground motions in a local simulation like that. And we have heard about it in the morning. The EQ sim, for example, allows you to do that injection from the free field into a local field. And if you streamline this and make it as an available tool to structural engineers, they can access these large-scale simulations and use it in their local application. For example, that local application can be OpenSeas, tons of people use it, or Abacus, etc. But yeah, it's possible, and it's already available, actually, EQ Sim and our workflows. It's just that we don't have a lot of users yet.
Any other question?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if ET could say something about the numerical implementation of the nonlinear model. Was it implicitly done, explicitly done? I saw your timing estimates.
Yeah. So it's an explicit code. You're just doing basically a stress update, but you're not doing any kind of return mapping or any kind of iterations there, yes. Okay. But that's extra computation still, and it makes a huge difference ultimately in the wall clock time. Yeah, but I cannot be sure how it scales with number of...
That's just due to the stress update?
Just due to the stress update. Okay. And then, of course, you're doing the stress update almost everywhere because all the elements are assumed nonlinear in that layer. So it's very broad nonlinearity.
So you have a nonlinear veneer on top of the...
Linear rock, yeah. So after a certain depth, we just let go to a linear.
How do you define that depth? Based on which parameter? How you define that depth? What parameters are you using?
It's the... Yeah, thank you. It's a bit arbitrary, I guess, at this point, but we need to decide where the rock is. And I cannot really off the top of my head recite what threshold we picked, but we picked a threshold.
On the VS?
On the VS.
Sometimes what we do is we run sample 1D site response analysis to get a sense of where the strains ranges are. Because the VS might be, but if the motion is Taiwan, like 3G, right, or 5G, then you might need to account for a stiffer site. So we just get sample sites, and we get the range of the hazard that we're interested in, and that's where we define, based on the strain amplitude. where the,
Scenario-based,
yeah, but this law is 1D,
it's easier.
right? So that's where we pick what velocity is the rock, the geotechnical rock, right? For the purposes of saving computation.
Any other question, comment? So why don't we thank Brett, Remote, and ET and LBNL.